Hi everyone, it's Jordan Johnson here, and today is going to be the very first episode of a new series called In the News, where I will be discussing the current events of the past week. It's been a very eventful first week of the new year, and we have lots to talk about, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. First, we're going to talk about the Georgia runoff election. So this seems like it was so long ago, but it was just last week. Election day in Georgia was on Tuesday, January 5th, and later on that night we found out that Raphael Warnock would be the projected winner against the incumbent Republican senator in Georgia, Kelly Loeffler. And then the next day, we soon found out that Jon Ossoff was also going to be the projected winner for his race against the incumbent Republican David Perdue. Raphael Warnock won with 51% of the vote with a 93,000 vote difference. In Ossoff's election, he won by a little bit of a closer margin, just 50.6%, with a little over 53,000 vote difference. So I was actually in Georgia for the holidays, visiting family 3 weeks prior to the Senate runoff elections. And as soon as I stepped foot in Georgia, I was infiltrated with ads on social media, on random apps on my phone, on YouTube, on Hulu, from both sides. They were really trying to tap into all of the different demographics there in Georgia. I saw all different types of ads, some with Democrats targeting traditionally Republican voters, and some with Republican voters targeting traditionally Democratic voters. Ads were really all over the place. You can tell that they were trying to engage and tap in with voters all over the spectrum to boost that voter turnout for this runoff election, and they definitely succeeded. Raphael Warnock is actually the first Black senator from the South, the first Black Democratic senator from the South, and he is actually a Morehouse alumni and is the current pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is, of course, Martin Luther King's church. So that was really exciting. Jon Ossoff is also a very young, he's only 33 years old, and he is going to be the next senator of Georgia. So this was a very big election. People from all across the country were honing in on Georgia because, first of all, Georgia had just had this huge historic flip in the presidential elections, going from Republican to voting for Joe Biden for president. So it was a really historic election. So people wanted to see what would happen in the runoff. And everyone knew that this was going to be a very close race. But I just don't think they realized how close it was going to be. I didn't want to get my hopes up with Warnock and Ossoff winning the election. So I really just didn't want to think about it that much, even though ads were everywhere, so I was kind of forced to think about it. It was right in the forefront of my mind, even though I'm not a Georgia voter. But the reason why this got so big, so much media attention across the country, is because the balance of the Senate was in the hands of this election. If the Republicans would have won the Senate runoff, then they would have maintained the majority in the Senate. But because they lost and the Democrats won, it is now a 50-50 split Senate. But we have a Democratic president and vice president, Kamala Harris. And if you didn't know how the tie-break thing works, basically the vice president gets to be the tie-breaking vote. Meaning, since Kamala Harris will be the next vice president of the United States, she is the deciding vote, meaning that it's basically a Democratic majority. Mitch McConnell will no longer be the Senate majority leader because his party is no longer in the majority, and that was a huge objective for Democrats all across the country. So I think you can say this was a successful blue wave, but we're definitely going to have to keep an eye out on the election coming up next year. Next, y'all, we are going to talk about this attempted coup of the Capitol. This honestly feels like it was more than a week ago too, because it's been the only thing everyone is talking about. Last Wednesday, when the certification of the votes was happening for the presidential election, white supremacists and Trump voters and Trump supporters, Trump stans, stormed the Capitol. I'm not surprised that it happened. I mean, I don't see how anyone could be surprised that it actually happened. They had t-shirts printed up with the date on it, January 6th, Civil War. They were posting on social media about this weeks in advance. Trump was posting things about it, telling people, see you January 6th. He did a speech that morning saying that we're going to be marching to the U.S. Capitol.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down. Anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
I just don't see how people didn't expect for this to happen. And I don't see how security wasn't what it needed to be. We had literally all of the lawmakers in the United States, all of the Senate, all of Congress, the current vice president, the soon-to-be vice president, all in this one building, and security just wasn't it, you guys. And you guys saw people were breaking windows, scaling walls, just doing absolutely insane things inside of a federal building, and the police were nowhere. I am more appalled that there wasn't action being taken than the fact that these people actually stormed into the Capitol and had an attempted coup, because I've learned to not underestimate the other side and what they have going over there. But as I was watching this unravel on TV, I was thinking to myself, police are going to storm in, they're going to tear gas, they're going to rubber bullets, they're going to arrest these hundreds and hundreds of people. And that just did not happen. And that's where my disappointment and my anger and my frustration came from. That we're seemingly that authorities were just letting this happen. And I was just so appalled that they were just letting it happen. This was the ultimate example of white privilege to me. You can pull these footages from these two events side by side. One was a protest. One was an attempted coup. In one, you see an abundance of police presence in the National Guard and the military and tear gas and pepper spray and all these things. In the other one, you see people moving barriers. You see people opening doors. You just see a complete different picture. And so I just want people to realize that a lot of people are going around saying, like, how could this happen? This isn't America, including Joe Biden going on a press conference talking about how this isn't America, this isn't how we are. But that's wrong. This is America. This is what the country is built on. This is it. We have seen this for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and I just can't see how anyone could say otherwise. American is built on racist principles. It's built on the backs of marginalized and minority communities. So the fact that someone can say that this isn't America, I beg to differ. So arrests have been made in recent days. We have seen pictures of people in the Senate, on the Senate floor, climbing up walls. We see people with zip ties. We saw people in Nancy Pelosi's office stealing things, sitting at her desk, feet up, relaxing. And so a lot of these people have been identified from these videos and pictures that were taken inside and outside of the Capitol. People were doing interviews, telling people their name, where they're from, like it was okay what they did, like it wasn't against the law. So several arrests have been made, and some of these people are actually elected officials back in their home states, because these people travel from across the country to come to DC. So there were lawmakers in various states that were arrested. There are plenty of known white supremacists, leaders in the white supremacist community There were QAnon leaders and just a bunch of people, no good people, that have finally been arrested. But in my opinion, they should have been arrested that day at the Capitol. They should not have been allowed to leave the Capitol grounds as free people. There's no reason why their arrest had to happen days and days later when they could have been arrested during the act. And one last thing I'm going to touch on about the attempted coup, because I know we're going to be talking about this pretty much all year long. I just want to discuss the privilege and the entitlement that these people had to have. I've seen people on social media comparing this to the Black Lives Matter protests that happened during the summer, and not comparing it in a way that I did earlier, but comparing it in a way saying that people during the summer protesting for Black lives were the same as people, they use the word protesting a stolen election. So first of all, this was not a stolen election. We know that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we know that this wasn't a stolen election. These people took to the Capitol, took to the streets of Washington, D.C. because they were upset that they didn't get their way. If this were to happen every 4 years, do you realize how worse off this country would be? You can't just decide to storm the United States Capitol because your candidate didn't win the election. This is completely different. These people were throwing a temper tantrum because they didn't get their way. Meanwhile, during the summer, people were protesting for civil rights. Civil rights versus a temper tantrum because your candidate didn't win the election, they don't equate. And just the privilege and the entitlement that these people had to have to actually go into this Capitol building and fly Confederate flags in a U.S. Capitol building. It's treason, it is deplorable, and it's domestic terrorism. We have to call a spade a spade. We have to call it what it is. It's domestic terrorism. And I am looking forward to the consequences that these people are going to face, and not just the protesters, but all of the Republican lawmakers, Donald Trump, who incited this whole thing, which we'll get into a little bit later. There's already tons and tons of people that are resigning. The police force, the Capitol Police Force, need to be looked into because they just dropped the ball on so many levels. And like I said, my disappointment doesn't even come from the fact that these people felt entitled to actually storm up in the U.S. Capitol, but the fact that there was no immediate consequences. I'm really upset about that, and it needs to be looked into, and consequences definitely need to follow. All right, next we're going to move into the certification of the votes from the U.S. presidential election. So Congress is actually in the middle of doing this while the attempted coup was happening, and then they had to pause and come back and do it. So basically, Republicans in the House and the Senate challenged the votes in Pennsylvania and in Arizona. They're saying that the election was stolen, even though there was absolutely no evidence. Courts all around the country have already thrown out the case that this was a stolen election. This election was won by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, fair and square, but Republicans in Congress refused to believe that. So like I said, votes were challenged in Pennsylvania and Arizona. Republicans wanted to vote to challenge the results in states including Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin, but they failed to garner Senate support, so they could only go through with the ones from Pennsylvania and Arizona. Like I said, at the end of the day, there was absolutely no evidence that this election was stolen, and all the votes ended up being certified at the end of the night, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take office as planned on Inauguration Day on January 20th. And lastly, for this week in the news, let's talk about this Trump social media ban. So after the attempted coup on the Capitol building, Twitter actually banned Trump from using its platform indefinitely. You know this had to be a huge blow to Trump. Twitter is his most used social media platform, and for him to be banned indefinitely was a big deal. Facebook also banned Trump, but they didn't go as far as Twitter did on banning him indefinitely, but he will be banned for the remainder of his term until Inauguration Day, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris take office on January 20th. So a lot of people are blaming Trump for inciting the attempted coup on the Capitol, including myself. He is the ringleader of these people. Even Republican lawmakers were trying to get Trump to call off this aggressive and violent mob that was attempting to take over the Capitol last week. Democratic lawmakers, including the House Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi, have introduced the idea of the 25th Amendment. So basically what the 25th Amendment is for presidents that can no longer fulfill their duty as president. So this could happen when a president falls ill or they're incapacitated in any way. But for this, the vice president would have to be on board. And so for that, Mike Pence will have to be on board, and majority of the current cabinet, for the 25th Amendment to be invoked, which is more than likely not going to happen. And I'm definitely okay with that. Also, because if the 25th Amendment were to go into effect and Pence in fact became president for this next week and a half, he could then pardon Trump for any wrongdoing, and then Trump couldn't be prosecuted even after he were president. And we don't want that at all. We want that man to go down for everything he's done. So I don't see the 25th Amendment actually happening. The other idea that has been introduced is to impeach him for the second time. I've heard a lot of concerns about this approach because we only have about a week and a half maybe left to Trump's term. And so people are just wondering if the impeachment process can actually go through that soon. And the answer is yes, it is. So the House of Representatives has actually already introduced the articles of impeachment, and they plan on voting on it today. The reason that I think that this is the best way to go, because Trump can potentially be banned from ever running for office again. And this is so important. There's already been talks of him trying to run in 2024. And honestly, he has a huge base. I think they'll stand by his side and come back in 2024. And he could actually get the Republican nomination. And so for that to not happen, to ensure that that will not happen, the articles of impeachment, if voted on, he could be banned from ever running for any elected office ever again. And I think that's so important. This man didn't deserve to be president the first time, and we definitely need to try to keep him out of office. That is it for this week in the news. I really hope you enjoyed and you got informed. Be sure to like and share this video with your friends, your followers, your family, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at Next Era Media. I'm Jordan Johnson, and I'll see you guys next week for more in the news.